Rules are rules, Your Honor. I want you to sit with that for a second. Deborah Fenwick, the self-appointed president of the Maple Crest Homeowners Association, a woman whose entire personality is a laminated binder of bylaws, looked me dead in the eye, pointed at my 2 foster kids standing frozen by the swing set, and told them to leave. 8-year-old Marcus had his hand on the slide. 6-year-old Talia was mid-giggle, her shoe still swinging from where she'd kicked it off. And Deborah, arms crossed over her Maple Crest golf polo, announced to a playground full of parents that non-resident children weren't permitted without a guest pass signed 48 hours in advance. Marcus and Talia live with me. They are residents. Deborah knew that. She'd seen the paperwork. She just didn't like what kind of paperwork it was. I stayed calm. I always stay calm, it's kind of my job. But I made a note, right there in my head, of exactly what she'd said and exactly how she'd said it. Because in about 6 days, Deborah Fenwick was going to find out who she'd said it to. My name's Renata Cole. I'm 44, divorced, and for the last 11 years I've been a judge on the county family court bench. The kind of judge who spends her days deciding whether kids get to stay with the people who love them. It's heavy work. It's also the reason I became a foster parent myself, 6 years ago, after watching one too many kids get shuffled between strangers with nowhere soft to land. Marcus came to me 2 years ago. Talia, 8 months. They're not permanent placements yet, that's still working through the system, ironically a system I know better than almost anyone. But as far as I'm concerned, and as far as the law is concerned, they are my kids. Full stop. We moved to Maple Crest last spring. Good schools, a park 2 blocks over, a community pool the listing photos made look like a resort. The realtor mentioned the HOA fees with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd fielded complaints about it before. I should have listened harder to that neutrality. Deborah runs Maple Crest the way some people run empires, with a spreadsheet, a grudge list, and an unshakable belief that she is the last line of defense between property values and total societal collapse. I'd heard about her before we even closed on the house. The Ferraro's 2 streets over got a citation for a garden gnome Deborah decided was not in keeping with the aesthetic covenant. The Okafors were fined for a basketball hoop that had been there, unbothered, for 6 years, right up until their teenage son started dating a girl Deborah didn't approve of. A coincidence Deborah swore up and down was a coincidence. Small stuff, petty stuff, the kind of stuff you roll your eyes at over dinner and forget by dessert. What I didn't know yet, what none of us knew yet, was that Deborah had a particular theory about our family. She'd mentioned to another board member, who later told me, that she thought foster kids brought a certain element into a neighborhood. She never said that to my face. She didn't have to. She said it with guest passes instead. The playground sat smack in the geographic center of Maple Crest, which meant everybody's kids ended up there eventually, and everybody's parents ended up watching Deborah patrol it like she was guarding a nuclear facility. I'd seen her turn away a nanny once for not having proof of employment laminated to a badge. I thought that was absurd. I did not think it was a preview. It was a Tuesday. Sun out, temperature perfect, the kind of afternoon that makes you grateful you moved somewhere with sidewalks. I'd picked Marcus and Talia up from their after-school program and we'd walked straight to the playground. Backpack still on, because Talia had been talking about the swings since Monday. Deborah was already there. Of course she was. She had a clipboard, an actual clipboard, and she was doing rounds, which is a phrase she used unironically, like she was a nurse and not a 56-year-old woman in a golf visor. Marcus got to the slide first. Talia dropped her backpack by the bench and made a beeline for the swings. I sat down, pulled out my phone to answer one work email, and that's when I heard it. Excuse me. Excuse me. Deborah was walking toward the swings fast, clipboard against her chest like a shield. She stopped in front of Talia. 6 years old, one shoe already off, and said, loud enough for the whole playground to hear, "Sweetheart, are your parents members here?" Talia, confused, pointed at me. I was already standing. "Is there a problem?" I asked. Deborah turned to me with the particular smile of someone who has been waiting for this exact moment. "Mrs. Cole, I don't believe I have these children on file as residents. They live with me, at 214 Birchwood. Same address as me. Are they your biological children?" I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice level because I've spent 11 years learning how to keep my voice level in rooms far worse than this one. They're my foster children. They're residents of this household. Deborah made a small note on her clipboard. An actual note. In front of my kids. Per Maple Crest Bylaw 4.2, non-resident minors require a guest pass submitted 48 hours in advance and co-signed by a legal guardian on file with the board. I am their legal guardian. Not on file with the board. A woman on a nearby bench. I'd later learn her name was Priya, and that she'd become one of my closest friends in the neighborhood. Actually laughed out loud, then caught herself and turned it into a cough. Deborah didn't laugh. Deborah pointed at Marcus, who had frozen on the slide, one hand gripping the rail, watching this unfold with the specific stillness kids learn when they've lived through enough instability to know that adults arguing means something bad is coming. Sir, I need you to come down from there, please. Don't talk to him like that, I said, and something in my voice finally cracked through the calm. I'm simply enforcing policy, Mrs. Cole. If you have a problem with policy, you're welcome to bring it to the board. She said the board the way other people say, the Supreme Court. A dad near the jungle gym. I didn't know him yet either. Called over, Deb, come on, they're just kids. Deborah didn't even turn her head. Rules are rules, she said, and looked at me like she expected that to be the end of it. I took Marcus and Talia home that day. I didn't argue further in front of them. Some fights aren't worth winning in front of an audience of 6- and 8-year-olds. But I called the HOA management office the next morning, calm, professional, the way I'd handled every unreasonable person who'd ever sat across from me in chambers. The woman who answered, Carol, was apologetic and clearly exhausted. Deborah's particular about the guest pass policy, she said carefully, in the tone of someone who'd had this exact conversation before. But foster children living in the home should just need proof of placement. I can help you get that filed. I sent the paperwork that afternoon. Placement letter, my ID, the works. I assumed that would be the end of it. It was not the end of it. 3 days later, I got a letter. An actual paper letter, HOA letterhead, hand-delivered to my mailbox, informing me that the board had reviewed my submission and determined that guest pass privileges could not be extended to children in temporary or unverified custodial arrangements, citing liability concerns for the association and, I kid you not, consistency of the resident community. I called the number on the letter. Deborah picked up. Deborah, this is Renata Cole. I received your letter. Yes, I hoped it would clear things up. It doesn't. Foster placements are legal custodial arrangements. I have the documentation. What exactly is unverified about a state-issued placement letter? Well, temporary is temporary, Mrs. Cole. We can't just change our policies every time someone's situation is a little fluid. She said fluid like it was a diagnosis. So you're telling me my foster children can't use a public amenity in the neighborhood we live in? It's not public. It's a community amenity for verified residents. I don't make the rules, I just uphold them. This was, I would point out on multiple later occasions, an extraordinary thing for the actual president of the board, the person with unilateral authority to interpret and enforce every bylaw in that binder, to say. I asked to bring it to the full board. Deborah informed me the next meeting wasn't for 6 weeks, and that in the meantime, for the comfort of all residents, she'd be asking the property manager to post a reminder sign at the playground. She did. 2 days later, a laminated sign, zip-tied to the fence, reading, Resident children only. Guest passes required for all others. No exceptions. Underneath, in smaller print, a line that made Priya send me a photo with 4 separate exclamation points. Violations will be reported to association security. Maple Crest did not have security. Maple Crest had a retired mall cop named Gary who worked 2 days a week and mostly directed traffic during the 4th of July parade. Deborah had, in effect, threatened to sick Gary on my 6-year-old. At the next impromptu gathering of neighborhood parents, the kind that happens organically at pickup time, nobody officially invited, Deborah doubled down further, unprompted, to a small crowd that included Priya, the dad from the jungle gym whose name turned out to be Marcus, funny coincidence, different Marcus, and 2 moms I hadn't met yet. I just think, Deborah said, adjusting her visor, that if we let every custody situation dictate policy, we lose all consistency. I have to think about the whole community, not just one family's situation. Their situation, Priya said flatly, is that they're kids. I'm not trying to be unkind, Deborah said, in the exact tone of someone who was being extremely unkind. I'm just the one who has to enforce the rules around here. Somebody has to. Nobody had asked her to be that somebody quite so enthusiastically. The board meeting Deborah had pushed to 6 weeks out ended up happening a lot sooner than that, because I requested an emergency session, which, per Maple Crest's own bylaws, any resident in good standing is entitled to do with sufficient signatures. Getting the signatures took 2 days. Nobody in that neighborhood needed convincing. The meeting was held in the clubhouse. Folding chairs, fluorescent lighting, maybe 30 residents packed in. More than I'd seen at anything since we moved in. Deborah sat at the head table with the rest of the board, clipboard in front of her like a talisman, and opened the floor by reading Article 4.2 aloud. Slowly, like we were all a little slow for not understanding it the first time. So as you can see, she said, the policy exists to protect the integrity of our community amenities, and exceptions simply cannot. Deborah, I said, standing, before you finish that sentence, I want to make sure the board understands what you're actually enforcing. You're telling this room that a state-certified foster placement, backed by a county family court order, doesn't meet your bar for verified residency. I'm saying the board sets its own standard. The board's standard can't override state custody law. I know, because I'm the one who signs the orders. The room went quiet in that specific way rooms go quiet when everyone senses something is about to change shape. I'm sorry, Deborah said. I reached into my bag and set my county ID on the table in front of her. Not dramatically, just plainly, the way you'd hand someone a document they needed to actually read. The Honorable Renata Cole. Family Court, 3rd Judicial Circuit. I place children in homes for a living, Deborah. I've reviewed placements for this entire county for 11 years. I know exactly what verified means under the law, because I'm the one who verifies it. Carol, the property manager, who'd come to observe, actually put her hand over her mouth. Priya, 3 rows back, did not bother hiding her smile at all. Deborah's face did something complicated. The specific collapse of a person realizing the rulebook they'd been hiding behind had just been read back to them by someone who'd written half of it. I didn't. That's not information I had, she stammered. You had it, I said. I sent it in the placement letter 3 weeks ago. You just decided it wasn't good enough. The emergency board vote happened that same night. Article 4.2 was suspended pending legal review. A review that, unsurprisingly, found it violated fair housing protections around family status. It was rewritten within a month to explicitly include foster and kinship placements as full residents. No guest pass required. Full stop. Deborah didn't survive the meeting as president. She technically finished out the calendar year, but the vice president, a soft-spoken engineer named Walter who'd apparently been quietly appalled by her for years, took over de facto leadership of every meeting after that. At the annual election the following spring, Deborah didn't even bother running again. She knew the math. The playground sign came down within 48 hours. Gary, the part-time security guard, was, to my knowledge, never once dispatched to enforce a guest pass policy against a child, before or since. What surprised me most wasn't the vote or the sign coming down. It was the neighborhood. Priya organized a welcome playdate the following weekend. Unprompted, just kids and popsicles and lawn chairs. Like the neighborhood collectively wanted to hand Marcus and Talia back the afternoon Deborah had taken from them. The jungle gym dad brought a spare kiddie pool because it's hot and also because, well, nobody said Deborah's name once. I heard secondhand that Deborah still lives in Maple Crest. I see her sometimes at the mailboxes. She's polite now, in the tight, overcorrected way people are polite when they know they got caught being small in public. She's not on any committee anymore. Last I heard she'd asked about joining the landscaping subcommittee and been quietly, gently, declined. Marcus, for what it's worth, doesn't remember most of it. Kids are resilient that way, thank God. What he remembers is the popsicle playdate. What he remembers is that the swings were open. I've sat on the bench for 11 years, and if there's one thing that job has taught me, it's that power without accountability always eventually meets a mirror it didn't expect. Deborah wasn't cruel because she had authority. She was cruel because she assumed no one in that room could ever check it. I don't tell the story because I got to have a dramatic moment with an ID badge, honestly. I tell it because Marcus and Talia are residents. They were always residents. It shouldn't have taken a judge to prove that. It should have just been true because it was true. If you've ever dealt with a Deborah in your own neighborhood, a badge, a binder, a laminated sign with somebody else's kid's name basically on it, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. And if you're fostering or thinking about it, the kids notice more than we think. Make the swings open for them. Every time.